Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're bringing to life a really fascinating conversation between two characters, Mira and Arav. They managed to take these super abstract concepts of business management and make them incredibly tangible. Picture this, okay? They're up on a sunlit terrace, scattered with handwritten notes, faded receipts, and a massive blueprint of Mira's grandfather's textile unit. Arav pulls out a big sheet of brown wrapping paper and some thumbtacks. And right there, under a clear sky, they start mapping out the hidden forces that make businesses either thrive or completely collapse. They call these forces systems and strategy.
Okay, let's dive into this, starting with this absolutely fantastic insight from Arav. He says how one small leak can flood the whole house. It's a simple thought, but it perfectly hits the nail on the head. It captures exactly why grasping the interconnectedness of systems is absolutely crucial for any manager, leader, or entrepreneur out there. Because look, an organization isn't just a bunch of people sitting in different rooms doing their own unrelated things. It's a whole structure. And if you ignore how the plumbing connects from the basement all the way to the roof, well, you're gonna get flooded. So let's look at exactly how we navigate this structure.
The web. Navigating the business web.
So, think of this as an intricate web of strings connecting every single desk, machine, and person in an organization. To really ground this idea, Mira brings up her grandfather's textile unit. Now, this place had completely distinct sections, right? Weaving, dyeing, packaging, sales. Each had its own rhythm, but they were inextricably bound together in this web. And this brings us to systems thinking. This approach requires us to view the organization not as isolated little departments, but as a living, breathing whole. Systems thinking demands that we look far beyond those surface-level symptoms to find the actual root causes of a problem. Like in that textile unit, if sales were suddenly falling, the root cause might not actually be the sales team at all. Mira noted that if there was just a simple delay over in the dyeing section, it created a massive bottleneck that slowed down the entire operation, which eventually hit those sales numbers. It constantly asks us, where are the real bottlenecks? What are the repeating patterns here?
And this brilliantly illustrates the four universal characteristics of any system, using Mira's highly relatable cooking analogy. First up, you have inputs. That's your resources, the people, the money, or, if we're cooking, the ingredients. Second, the processes. These are the activities transforming those inputs, just like following a recipe. Third, you have outputs, the final product, the service, or the finished dish itself. And crucially, the fourth step, feedback. This is the taste test. If the feedback says the dish is, say, way too salty, you take that information and you adjust your inputs and processes for next time. Basically, every business out there is essentially running this kitchen.
But, as we know, not all kitchens or businesses are built the same. Consider the stark contrast between two very distinct environments. On one hand, we have open systems. These constantly interact with their environment. They adapt, they evolve, and they survive. On the other hand, closed systems. These stay completely isolated, they resist change, shrink, and eventually just collapse. Mira actually shared a very real cautionary tale of a company that stubbornly refused to adopt digital tools. And because they operated as a closed system, flat out refusing to interact with that changing technological environment, they lost their clients, they lost their top talent, and ultimately, they lost their relevance entirely.
Now, inside a healthy open system, you have smaller units called subsystems. These are your specific departments or teams. And when these subsystems truly collaborate, well, you get synergy. Synergy is that magic that happens when the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. It creates value that no single part could ever produce on its own. For example, imagine a bakery. Synergy happens when the marketing team doesn't just, sell whatever's given to them, but actively works alongside the product team to co-create a brand new flavor together. That kind of collaboration, that is the web at its absolute strongest.
But a well-connected web still needs to know which direction the wind is blowing. That brings us to track 2, the wind. Strategy, harnessing the wind. So if systems show us how things connect, strategy is the forward momentum. As Mira so beautifully put it, strategy is the compass that tells an organization exactly where to go, even when the map itself is completely unclear. And this strategy doesn't just magically happen at the CEO's desk, it cascades down through 3 distinct levels. We can instantly clarify this using Mira's cousin's bakery. At the very top, you have corporate strategy. This defines your overall purpose and scope. For the bakery, the corporate strategy was that big, bold decision to expand beyond just retail and actually get into catering. Next down is business strategy, which focuses on market competition. How will the bakery compete in the catering world? By differentiating themselves with high-quality organic ingredients. Finally, the functional strategy. This is down at the department level.
To actually support that organic catering, they needed a functional strategy to redesign their packaging and retrain their staff. Do you see how they just stack perfectly on top of one another?
The strategic management process, moving from plan to action.
Right, so how do we actually create these strategies? It's not just sitting in a room and having a good idea, as nice as that sounds. There is a systematic engine that actually drives this management. It's designed to take all that abstract planning and turn it into concrete, measurable reality on the ground. It moves through 4 distinct steps. First, environmental scanning, looking closely at internal and external factors. Second, strategy formulation. And Arov notes something really important here. Formulation requires immense courage and clarity, because making a choice literally means you have to let go of something else. Third is strategy implementation. And pay close attention here, because as Mira points out, this is usually where the most brilliant strategies completely fail. It's rarely a bad idea, it's almost always weak execution. And finally, strategy evaluation. This isn't about pointing fingers or assigning blame, but rather about learning and adjusting on the fly.
To fuel that very first step, environmental scanning, managers use some highly effective strategic tools. You've got the classic SWOT analysis for weighing internal strengths and weaknesses against external opportunities and threats. You have PESTLE to scan the broader macroeconomic environment. And you have Porter's 5 Forces, which deeply analyzes industry competitiveness. Mira explained how Porter's model specifically helped her cousin's bakery. By really analyzing the threat of new entrants and the bargaining power of suppliers, her cousin could clearly understand the mounting pressures she was feeling from those new cafes popping up down the street, not to mention the suddenly rising costs of her baking ingredients.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it frames strategic intent, because honestly, all the scanning and planning in the world won't help you if you don't have a bold, long-term vision. Strategic intent is so much more than just hitting a quarterly goal. It is a deep, unwavering commitment to a purpose. It provides a focused ambition. Think of a tiny startup operating out of a messy garage that maintains this massive dream of becoming a global brand. That intent is what guides every single choice they make.
But to actually achieve that intent, you need to understand the relationship between core competencies and strategic fit. Core competencies are your unique strengths, right? The things that really give you an edge. For the bakery, maybe it was a closely guarded family recipe. For a tech firm, a proprietary algorithm. But just having a competency isn't enough. You absolutely must have strategic fit. This is the crucial alignment between your strategy and your specific environment. Arov warned about the severe dangers of ignoring this fit. He recalled this one company that blindly tried to replicate a highly successful urban business model out in a rural area. They completely ignored the cultural differences and the environmental realities. And honestly, it was a total disaster.
Leadership and strategic agility, bringing the web and the wind together.
To pull this all together, we have to accept a pretty vital truth. The world is volatile. The map is constantly changing. A strategy that works brilliantly today might completely fail tomorrow. Rigid strategies are just going to snap in a storm, but agile ones, they bend and they survive. And bringing the web and the wind together to navigate those storms requires a very specific kind of leadership. As Mira says, a good strategy needs a storyteller, someone who makes people believe. Leaders have to articulate the vision, build trust, and mobilize action across every single level of the business. Strategy simply cannot just be a top-down exercise of staring at KPIs and dashboards. It requires deeply engaging your frontline employees. Why? Well, because the people on the front lines are almost always the very first to see those subtle deviations, the new problems, and even the hidden possibilities that the leaders sitting up in the boardroom completely miss.
As Mira and Arov finally packed up their papers on that terrace, they realized that good managers must learn to see both the interconnected web of systems and the driving wind of strategy. So I want to leave you with the very same introspective questions they wrote down in their notebook. Ask yourself, what systems am I part of? How do I affect them? What is my strategic intent? And maybe most importantly, how do I adapt when the map changes? Take a moment to really let that sink in. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.